welcome to the Piston Fanatic. I'm your host, Dave Dalton, and I'm excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I've been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. I've also been the varsity basketball coach of a very successful program in northern Michigan. And I would like to thank our listeners from all over the world for listening, and please subscribe. Click on that like button. We got a lot to go over today. Cade's injury. We're going to talk about, really dive into the trade deadline. It's exactly 1 month from today is the trade deadline. And we're going to talk about free agency and the draft and what we need to do to fix this team. So let's first start talking about Cade's injury. So if you remember, during the Warriors game, he drove to the basket and he got banged on his knee, and I got so scared he started rubbing his knee, and he ended up going to the free throw line and shooting free throws. But I was so scared that that was going to be over, that his knee was hurt, and he ended up playing the whole game, and he played really well. But then last night against Denver, they took him out at the 6-minute mark, and they don't ever usually take him out at the 6-minute mark. But then Monty said that they thought he was in foul trouble. But anyway, he disappeared from the bench. So that led me to believe that he went back to the locker room and they looked at his knee. And so then he came back in and started the second quarter. He played, and then he played for a while, and then they took him out, and then he went back into the locker room. So that's, they said it's a left knee strain, and who knows? We don't know how bad it's hurt. Obviously you fear for the worst and hope for the best. And if he is hurt, that's going to really put a damper on our season, probably on my podcast, because I love Cade. But anyway, the only positive things that happened, we got to see last night that when he went out, Monty had Ivy touch the ball and run the offense. So he kind of switched him positions and ran these plays, which he should have been running all along, because Ivy needs to touch the ball more. And I'm going to keep on saying this, maybe every podcast, that Ivy and Cade need to play together, but they need to be staggered. They need to, when Cade's not on the floor, Ivy needs to be on the floor. When Ivy's not on the floor, Cade needs to be on the floor. And then they need to play together. And when they play together, then Ivy needs to handle the ball. So this, hopefully he's not out for long. And this is a terrible time. I predicted that the Pistons would do better in January. And now it's January. And I was hoping that because we would have Duran, Ivy, Cade, and those four guys together, and Asar playing, which Monty's not playing him, but I was hoping we'd have all those guys and that we would be able to play our best lineup. And we never hardly have got to this year. And hopefully we get to. Hopefully Cade's not out for long. But these were games that I thought we would win. I thought we had a shot at, winning the Golden State game and the Utah game. And we were close. And that is because partway we're close because we have our better lineup. So we had, before last night, we had 5 of our last 6 games within 6 points because we did have a better lineup there, even though Monty still messed that up to some degree. But hopefully Cade comes back quick. But we got the Kings tomorrow night, and I think I'm going to be telecasting after, putting a podcast on after that game, because I was going to drive down to watch my granddaughter play. But there's supposed to be a blizzard from up where I live in northern Michigan all the way down to Saginaw, and 10 inches of snow, and 35-mile-an-hour winds, so I probably won't be driving down. But anyway, Michigan plays tonight. Go Blue. Let's win the national championship. The Lions are in the playoffs. They're going to play against our old friend Matthew Stafford, and go Lions. But let's start talking about the core 4, and they have so much potential, and I was so excited about this year and about Cade, Ivy, Duran, and Asar. And we still have a lot of games left. Those guys need to get better, but we needed to have them in an environment where they were able to develop. And Monty is not providing that so far. We'll see what happens, but we need to trade. Regardless, we need to get pieces to go around the core 4, or one of those guys might end up being out, and traded. But if not, we need to find who we can play, and who is that? Who do we need to build around the core 4? Well, we need some veterans. So I'm thinking we need some guys like between 26 and 29. Preferably. We need guys, wings, so we're not having to play Isaiah Livers. So anyway, we need guys between 6'7" and 6'10" that can play defense, that they can play the 3 and the 4, and that can shoot. And so we desperately need guys that can shoot. And our three-point shooting is picked up, and that's another reason that's contributed to us winning more. But we need those guys at that age. And so that's what I'm going to look at in this episode about who we can look at and what we need to look for. I am going to mention right now that we have our first round draft pick, and because of the Isaiah Stewart trade, we cannot trade any future draft picks, but we can trade the first round pick this year. And I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but it's a really strong option because this is not a good draft. I think I'm going to talk about later 5 guys that I think are guys that we could use, but it's really, like swinging at a moving target. You don't know which one of these guys. I think one of them at least are going to be a great player, but I don't know which one because they're, but we need guys that are the 6'7" to 6'9" and can shoot. So anyway, but we can make the trade. But we have to make it. We can make an agreement with another team before the draft, and then pick a player, and then that other team asks us to pick, and then pick that player, and then make the trade. And so there's going to be teams. Every team thinks they're smart, and there's always players that teams fall in love with and think that they have great potential, and that we've seen it happen over the years where teams have traded up to get a certain guy, and even to surprise people. And so hopefully that happens this year. Hopefully we get the first pick, which is a bummer because our whole future would have been completely changed if we would have got Chet or if we would have got Wemby. But we still need to, if we do make our pick, take our pick, we need to get a power forward that can shoot the 3. Anyway, trades. The trade season's here, and if you know anything about the trades, it is not like, when trades are made usually, you would think that, oh yeah, this team we need a forward, and this other team needs a guard that can shoot, and so each of us got somebody that's kind of equal value, and so we'll trade each other and we'll both win. That's not how it works. The thing that it really determines most trades are financial. Whether a team is over the cap or at the cap, or whether a team has too many forwards, and we're going to talk about that. And there's just a lot of considerations of certain players' contract, how long it is, and we've seen it happen recently. Again, the Bradley Beal trade, Washington just wanted to get away from his money, and so they traded basically for nothing to get Bradley Beal, who was a really good player, and Utah got John Collins for basically nothing because they wanted to get off his contract. And so that happens all the time, and we need to take advantage of that. We need to look to take advantage of all this stuff. That cap space that we have is valuable, even though people are frustrated that we haven't used it. But we are going to be able to sign players that other people might not be able to sign. And so in the position thing, we look at, so who do we need to look at? And you never know where the trade's going to come from. There's always surprises. But you look at the Lakers, they need shooting. They have a little excess of forwards, of power forwards like that we might need. The Nets have too many forwards, and their season's going nowhere, so they're going to look to make moves, and they have a surplus of wings that can shoot. The Hawks, they're ready to blow it up. They're frustrated. Their season's not going like they thought it would, and so they said, their general manager said everybody's on the market for them except for Trey and Jalen Johnson. So they have a bunch of forwards, and so we're going to talk about some of those. But I'm just going to go back to how we can, take advantage of things. Malik Monk, and I told this story before, I think once, but the Hornets had him. He's this 22-year-old player for the Hornets a few years ago, and he's shooting 40% on threes, averaging 12 points a game, but whatever it is, they didn't really like about him, so they just let him go, and nobody wanted to sign him except then the Lakers did. So the Lakers got him for like $4 million a year, and he was great for them, and he shot 40% on threes, and they wanted to keep him, but they had no cap space. So they let him go, and Sacramento had cap space. I told my friend, we should get him. He can shoot 40% on threes, and he's young, and he's talented, and we can get him for cheap. And so the Kings got him for like $9 million a year. So now he's played 2 years for the Kings. Now he's going to get a big contract, and I don't know, it's probably too big for us. Plus he plays the guard position, and we need more of a forward. But he's going to be a free agent, so we'll see what happens with him. But my point is that there's teams that can't re-sign him. So the Kings, the Lakers would have wanted to sign him, just like the Denver Nuggets. They wanted Bruce Brown. He helped them win the championship, but they could not pay him as much as Indiana could pay him, and they had they were over the cap, so they had to let him go. And we see this happen all the time with players, and so we hopefully can take advantage of that. So um, and the player that I think that we can do it with is one of the Lakers. And again, I know people want us to make changes now. Another thing that causes trades and things is desperation. So the Lakers, they won that in-season tournament, and then they've been losing almost every game. They won last night, but they've been losing so many games, and they're frustrated and upset. They're upset with their coach playing bad lineups and being inconsistent, just like we are with Monty. The Warriors, they're desperate. They're falling apart, and they're frustrated with their coach. And they have some players that we're going to talk about that are frustrated, young players that are frustrated with playing time. But they have um, Taurean Prince, and he's 29, and so I'd rather him be 27, but he's 29, and he signed for them. He was a free agent, and he was with Minnesota, and they didn't have money to sign him, and nobody else wanted him. But he plays defense. He's 6'7", and he shoots the three. He's 44% overall, but 39% on threes. He's a really good defender, and he's a veteran, and he knows how to play, and he plays hard, and he plays smart. And so at the end of the year, we need more than one. We need more than one of those guys that are playing forward. And we have, whether if Monty decides that Asar can be a player and he can be part of our future, it doesn't matter. One of the beauties of having Asar is he can play the 2, 3, or 4. And so it doesn't matter, with these guys, like if getting Taurean Prince, it's not like it's going to take away his position. So anyway, I would love that signing, and I think what happens is we can you know we can outspend and overpay him more than what the Lakers can pay him, and we can pay even if another team wants to sign there's a taxpayers mid-level exemption for teams that are a non-taxpayers mid-level exemption, that like the Pistons, because we're non-taxpayers because we're not over the cap. So that's 13 million a year. So and then there's the over the cap teams have the taxpayers mid-level exemption, which is only 5 million. So the Lakers are over the cap, so they could only give him every year. You can pay one player and go over the cap, and so it's $5 million for them, but it's 13 million for us. And so even if another team wanted to, that wasn't over the cap, wanted to pay Taurean Prince $13 million, we have enough cap space. We could pay him 14. So that's just an example of what we could do, and he I think would be a really good player for us. So here's the thing that we have to look at, though. Who do we have to trade? And so obviously the big one that everybody talks about and has been talking about for 2 years is Bogey. And Bogey played really well last night again. He's had some struggles, but his defense is even worse than it was last year, and it wasn't good. And he's just getting older, and if we want to get an asset for him, again, I would rather have Taurean Prince than Bogey. Is Bogey a better player? Yes, offensively he is, but defensively he's not. And so, if like Bogey's +4 on offense and his player rating, but he's -8 on defense, we still come out on the wrong end of the stick. So we need to get Taurean Prince can shoot threes. And so anyway, that's just how I think and how I view it. And I think the Lakers are desperate for shooting, and so they might want Bogey. And I've talked about trading for Kuminga, and there's other teams that we could trade. If the Knicks want him, and Tibbs, their coach, Tom Thibodeau, he loves Burks. Burks played there for him for a couple years, and he even played the point for a whole season. He wasn't really even cut out to play the point, and they played him at point because Tibbs loved him. And so anyway, I want that pick back, that pick that we traded for Stu that the New York Knicks now own. And so if we can get that pick back, then we can trade other first-round picks, because we're handcuffed because Troy made that trade to get beef stew, and we traded to Houston, and then now it's been traded to New York, but it's protected. And so that we can't trade any future picks for anybody until that conveys. Like I said, we can trade this year's pick right after the draft. We can. So we'll see. I think that the Hawks might take him, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I really would love to get that pick back from the Knicks, and I would trade him Burks and Bogey to get that pick back. And I mean, they would have to send us Evan Fournier, who he's only got 1 year left on his contract, and then we can unload him. And Burks's contract is up after this year, and we have Bogey signed for next year, but there's a $2 million buyout, but it's for $20 million. So just interesting to see. I would love to see him get traded at the trade deadline, just because I still fear that he will get injured. Another valuable trade chip I thought we would have at the trade deadline was Monty Morris, and he has not played. He has not been. I haven't even heard he started to practice. I thought he was going to be reevaluated right about now, so I haven't heard a word about that. The Pistons don't give out much information, but he's a really good player. I wouldn't mind even re-signing him to an extension if he's checks out medically. But I wouldn't mind trading him. There's always teams that need. You hear talks, when I listen to different podcasts and talking about teams and how this team needs a backup point guard and this team needs more creators and things. And, Monty doesn't turn the ball over. He can shoot 38% on threes. And so he seems to be valuable. The trick always is, who wants to give up a first round pick, even though Monty Morris and Bojan and Burks are really more valuable in some ways. Who you draft, especially with these late first rounders, the chances of them ever being as good as Burks and Bogey is slim. There are certainly guys that do it, but it's a small percentage of people that are drafted in the 20s that end up being anywhere near as good as those guys. So a contending team you would think would want them, but that just is remains to be seen. But I think that the chances are slim that we could get a first round pick for Bogey, but not for Monty Morris. We got him for 2 second round picks, and just takes the right team at the right time. That has there's some teams that have more picks than others, but most of those are the rebuilding teams, other than Oklahoma City. Bagley's been talked about in trade talk. People have brought up rumors for him, even to the Knicks, and so again, I would trade Bagley and Bogey for that first round pick back. Wiseman, again, what are we doing with Wiseman? We're playing him, and are we going to keep him? Are we going to re-sign him? Would he re-sign for a low number? If we thought that he was part of our future at all, he'd have to be at a real low number for low risk. A lot of you, and I wouldn't be opposed to us getting a different center that could block shots and rebound and play defense, because Bagley and Wiseman's had some good moments, and Bagley's had some good games. They have been solid for a backup. For playing 15 minutes a game, those guys have had some good games. They've had some mediocre games, but they've had some good games. But if we could get somebody, but I think other teams would want that, and we really need to have a backup five that can shoot. And so there aren't very many of those guys that can block shots and shoot. I mean, there's Miles Turner, he can do it, but we're not getting him. So I don't know what's going to happen, with Bagley and Wiseman. Like I said, there's a better chance with him and Killian. They're both restricted free agents, and if we don't sign them, they're not proven to be hot commodities. But who knows, if somebody, if I were a team, I would take a swing. I think Killian could end up being okay. Not in Detroit, but I think that there's always a chance that he gets to a different place, different set of circumstances, gets his confidence, but he's been given every opportunity for the Pistons, and he hasn't done it. Stu has been talked about in trades. People have talked about that. I'm not sure how serious people are, and I'm not sure how much talk there's been actually since he got that $15 million a year contract that kicks in next year for 3 years. So I don't know what we would be able to get for him. I don't know. But there's a couple players. So, we're going to start talking about some other players. That the typical player that I would like the Pistons to get is John Collins. He is 26 years old. He is 6'9". He has averaged 16 points for his career, 8 rebounds, which is solid, 1.4 assists, shot 55%, 36% on threes. He's shooting 40% on threes this year. And so there's rumors out there that they're not thrilled with him. And, why were the Hawks always trying to get rid of him? So I would really want to do my due diligence and investigate and find out why do people not like him. I would really want to have to study all of his game and watch all of his body language and how he plays, and to see what is the reason why you would want to get rid of when there's such a shortage of guys. I know there was a year, I don't know how, like 3 or 4 years ago. So he's been around a long time for being only this year, for being 26, and um, he was like one of the only guys that ever had 60 dunks and 63s in a season. And so that just speaks to, he's a great lob threat, and he's a good defender. I mean, I don't think he's the greatest defender, but I think he's way above average and better than what we have. And he's a lot more mobile than Stu is. He can shoot better than Stu. He's a better lob threat than Stu. And so I wouldn't mind. But so he has Utah. Danny Ainge tries to screw everybody and tries to win every trade. So he'd rather not trade than not win the trade. So it remains to be seen if he would. But they really got him for basically nothing. So if they don't want him, and now they have Taylor Hendricks, who I really liked in last year's draft. But there's a logjam at the forward position, and they got some other guys that have been playing really well. So I'd take Taylor Hendricks in a heartbeat if I could trade. I could trade anything to them except the core four to get Taylor Hendricks. So he's 6'9" and can shoot the three. So that's why I wanted him in the draft. But who knows what Danny Ainge wants to do? He's making, Collins is making $25 million this year, 26 next year, 26 the following year, which is a player option. So we would have him for a few years. And that's what I want. With these guys, like I said, with Taurean Prince, he's 29, which is younger than 34, which is how old Bogey is, and he's a better defender. And he doesn't have all the different tricks that Bogey does. Bogey can score in so many different ways. And like I said, I would miss that, but I would still make the move because they're younger. But we're not going to get stuck with long-term money. So even with Collins, we would have to pay him for 2 more years after this year, and then he would have the option, which at this moment, if things worked out the way they are going for him right now, that he probably would end up opting into that player option on that 3rd year after this year, which is the 4th year. But again, the Hawks have too many wings, and they want to cut down their cap space, and so they value Jalen Johnson, who's he came out, he was with Duke, he was really highly recruited, and then he kind of didn't do that great at Duke. He had sat out, and there were some just questionable things about him, and I think he might have even quit at the end of the season. But now he's been there a couple years at Atlanta, and he's turning into like a star. And so they have too many forwards, and they have too much money. And here's the thing: DeAndre Hunter is another great example of he's 6'8", 26 years old. So that fits everything, and he's good on defense. He's not maybe as great as people thought he was once, but he had knee injuries, problems. So that is the thing. I would trade for him in a heartbeat if I didn't give up one of the core four and get him. But he's even been hurt. His knee's hurt. He's had some soreness in his knee this year and missed some games because of his knee. And so I think he's had surgery before on it. So I would just be real cautious of that. He's averaged 15 points a game, 4.1 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 46% from the field, and 40% on threes. So that is who we want without the knee injuries problems. And again, you do have to do all the detective work that you can to find out about a player's personality and about how hard they work and how they fit in with the team. Another guy, 30 years old, Dorian Finney-Smith, and he knocked down that killer 3 against us. It was a 2-point game, and then Finney-Smith hit a 3 from the corner against us when we played the Nets just recently. And he 6'7", and he's been regarded as a really good defender. So he's 30, so he has $14 million owed this year, 15 next year, and 16 the next year. So that's okay. We're committed to a 30-year-old. So he's 30 years this year. He'll be 31 and 32. So we'll have him through his age 32 and be paying him $16 million. And then we can just let him go, and then we still have that cap space back. And then if we want to re-sign him for whatever, we can re-sign him, or we can trade him at some point. But I think it's just valuable to us, the the Nets are in a weird situation. They're losing a bunch of games. They're not doing that great, and they have wings. Cam Thomas is really a wing. Cam Johnson is really is a wing for sure, and Mikal Bridges. So they got those guys that are all, Cam Thomas isn't making a lot of money, but he probably will be. And though Cam Johnson just signed a big contract, and Mikal Bridges is only getting like 26 million a year, but it's still quite a bit on a salary cap for a team that's not doing that great. So I would be willing to trade for Dorian Finney-Smith if for the right price. Tobias Harris, people have talked about it. Obviously, the Sixers are rolling. They're playing really great, and he's playing great, and they're not going to trade him, but he will be a free agent at the end of the year. And who knows? I kind of doubt that they're going to re-sign him. He's making over $30 million a year, and I think that he will 39 million a year. So he signed that big contract they kept him instead of keeping the guy that's plays for Miami there. That's their best player. But anyway, I lose my train of thought sometimes. But anyway, Tobias is 31 years old. He's averaging 17 a game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, shooting 51%, 37% on threes. So that is a great player. And he played in Detroit. I wanted Detroit to get him from Orlando even the year before we got him. He played good, and we traded him away for Blake Griffin, and then plus a first round draft pick, plus some other things, and he ended up becoming an all-star there, and then they traded him to the 76ers, and then he's played really well for them, and so he'll be 32 next year, and so how much would you sign him? Obviously, I would never trade anything for him, and again, I don't think the Sixers are going to trade him this year, but it remains to be seen whether they let him walk or not. But if I like him a lot. If we could get him under a good contract for a couple years, I would be interested. Rui Hachimura, not sure about his defense. That's the only thing. I haven't watched him play enough. I haven't ever heard that he's a good or bad defender. He's big and strong. He's 6'8". He's only 26 years old, which is right where I like it. He's been averaging 12 points in game. And when you average 12 points for the Lakers, and they got Davis and LeBron scoring a lot of points and dominating the ball, that's still a decent average. Of course, he's been in and out. He's been hurt a little bit, and they have been, they've been shifting their lineups right and left, and so there's a lot of frustration there. But he's 49% from the field. He can drive in and shoot pull-up jumpers, and he's shooting 37% on threes, which is right where we want. He's $17 million a year for 3 years with the Lakers, but they need shooters real bad. So again, Bogey and Burks would be definitely a fit there. They are definitely desperate because they are losing, and their timeline is now because LeBron, whether they keep him or not. So Gary Trent Jr., he's an interesting player to me. I never quite understood why exactly I didn't write down his contract. Oh, he's a free agent. That's why. He's 25. He's 25. So we need veterans. He's been around. So it's like at least his 5th year. So we got young guys. We do need veterans, but he shot the lights out against the Pistons when we played him the other day when we beat him. He was like at least 4 for 6 on threes, but he's shooting 40% from the floor, but he's a 3-point specialist, 39% on threes, and he's a knockdown shooter. So he's averaging 11.6 points and 2.2 rebounds and 1.7. But he's playing with Siakam and Scotty Barnes, and he was playing with OG Anunoby, and so there were a lot of guys, a lot of mouths to feed. So he did really good for that. So I'm not, just like Hachimura, I'm not quite sure about his defense. We don't need anybody that can't play defense. We don't need them. If they need to be average or better than average, and again, it depends on what you pay. So. The Warriors, they've been going through lots of problems because they've been losing like crazy. The Draymond thing, and Draymond, I just heard a report where he told the commissioner he was just going to retire, and the commissioner talked him out of retiring. And he's making over 20 million a year, so I don't know that it was hard to talk about it, but he is a high-strung, emotional guy, Draymond is, and so he talked him into coming back. So he's back with the team now. But anyway, they have problems, and they played the other day, and Kuminga started out really well, and he's like only 21, but he's been playing for a few years for him, and he He's going to be eligible to be extended this summer, and so he's not getting all the chances. He's been like Ivy's been jerked around up and down. Only the difference between Ivy and Asar getting jerked up and down, Kaminga's been playing on a team that won a world championship 2 years ago, and Ivy and Asar are playing on the worst team possibly in NBA history, which I don't really think talent-wise we are, but record-wise we very easily could be. So it's a little bit different. But Kuminga played like 18 minutes and he came out in the third quarter and then he never got to go back in and they barely lost the game. But was having a great game. And anyway, they had Kerr just stayed with the same lineup. So Moses Moody, and he hardly played against the Pistons. He did a great job guarding Cade in the few minutes he was in the game. It was very interesting when he was introduced and when he first entered the game, the Warriors fans cheered really loud for him. And so I think they're frustrated. There's fans that are frustrated everywhere. We think it's just us. We think that Monty's the only coach that people disagree with, but there's Steve Kerr, who's won all those championships. They still disagree with him. But Moses Moody, I would trade for. He's a guard. But he's a big guard. He's a great defender. He's a real good three-point shooter. I think he played on the same high school team as Cade, and I think he played 19 and under in like AAU with them or on the national team. But I would trade for Kuminga. So he's not happy. I guess after that he spoke out and said, "I don't have faith in Steve Kerr." Jonathan Kuminga said that. And then Moody spoke out and said basically the same thing about his role on the team. And so that makes you think they might be available. But evidently that Kuminga had a sit down with Steve Kerr and they kind of tried to iron things out. And then Kuminga led the team in minutes, played the next game. So who knows what's going to happen. But I would definitely trade and try to get Jonathan Kuminga. I would trade Burks and Bojan for him and Killian and Bagley or Weissman, whatever they want, I would give them for Kuminga and Moody. So, but again, the Warriors are desperate, so they almost feel like they have to make moves. So we talk about DeJounte Murray, and I'm not sure that he would come to the Pistons, but he's under contract and he's a guard. So if we got him, the only way we're getting him is to trade Jaden Ivey. So if that happens, so he's 27, and Ivey's 21, but he makes he's a really good defender, but I've heard people say that he's not that good a defender on big guards, even though he's 6'5", and he's skinny. He weighs less than me, but he's only 180, and but he's a real good player, but he's not. They don't think the fit is as good as they thought it was going to be with Trae Young, and he can play point and off guard. So he's really a great fit with Cade because he can guard the point guards and lock them down, the quicker, faster point guards. And then Cade can, because Cade's bigger, can guard somebody that's bigger. And so in that way, they're a real good fit. But he's, like I said, he's 27. He's averaging like 21 points a game this year, 4.6 rebounds, which is great for a guard, 5 assists. I think he might have made all defense. But he's 47% and he's shooting the three better than he's ever has. He's 38.4% on threes. So he's on, people have said that the Hawks have said they're listening to offers for him. So we'll see what they would want for him. I think they probably want more draft picks and we don't have any. So I don't know what can happen there unless we give him our first round pick at the trade right after the draft. We could agree just before the draft for him. So some people talked about Royce O'Neal. I'm not as excited about him because he's 6'4". He's considered a small forward, but he's 30 years old. He plays for the Nets. Again, they have too many people, too many wings, and I don't know how much money he makes. So, but he's another player some of my listeners have mentioned before. Dante DiVincenzo, I think he was going to be available. I was pretty excited that we might be able to get him, even though we don't need a guard, but it's a backup guard and to take Burks' place. And but now that they traded away Quigley to Toronto, so now they have more room for guards because there wasn't enough minutes to go around for their guards. But he's shooting 43% on threes. It seems like when I watch him play, he makes every one, and not just easy ones, not just wide open ones like some of our guys miss. But he's making $20 million a year, and so that's real doable for him. And he's a tough, savvy defender. So we're going to talk about the draft, and I saved it for last because I know a lot of people aren't into the draft, especially this time of year. A lot of people that even like the draft wait till later in the year, and I really dive way deeper into it later in the year. But I can tell you again, we have to draft if we don't get enough power forwards or stretch fours or whatever you want to call them, 3 4s. We need to draft one instead of drafting guards every year. And even with the second round pick, drafting Sasser, we we need to get some wings that can play defense and shoot. And so we need some 6'8", 6'8", around 6'8", that can play defense and shoot the three. And so I think that I'm going to name some guys, and I'm confident that one of these guys is going to be really great. But which one? So there's guys that fall in the draft all the time. Desmond Bane went 30th. Trey Murphy was drafted like 18th. He was picked way late. So a lot of times that teams that get to be real good in the NBA are lucky, and they make trades. So like even when Utah traded when they traded Davion Mitchell to Cleveland, they got like 3 first-round picks from Cleveland. That's what they wanted. But then to match salary, they had to throw in some players. So who did they throw in? Lauri Markkanen, who wasn't that valuable and his contract wasn't that high. And then he got to go to Utah and he got a real chance to show what he could do. Like I said, with Ivy. So Markkanen, when he played there, and I wanted Markkanen when he played for Chicago when he was younger. I liked him a lot, and I wanted us to trade for him. But when he was at Cleveland, he just didn't get the usage. And then he goes to Utah and he gets lots of usage, and he's an all-star. But Ivy's the same thing. When Ivy plays with Cade and Bogey, he hardly touches it, and Burks. And so I think that Monty needs to make sure that he does. But going to go through my favorite player so far. I mentioned him once before, Zachary Richard. He's 6'9" or 6'10". He can play multiple positions. He has a great feel for the game. He's a smart player. He passes the ball really well. He shoots 47% on threes. So if you're 6'9", 6'10", and you shoot 47% on threes, but the catch about all these guys is when you get younger guys, and that's partly why we lose. So I heard another thing about our team, that if we started Stu, Asar, Cade, Ivy, and Duran, that 9 teams, I used to say that the Michigan State's starting lineup was older than our starting lineup, but 9 teams in the Big Ten would have older starting lineups than what that lineup for the Pistons would be. So we're playing young guys. It's hard to win with young guys, and they take time to develop. So there's a progression that a lot of players make, and most of them do. And so if we draft another young guy, then they got to develop. And especially a lot of these guys need to develop. So it's going to take at least 2 years for these guys. It's not like these guys are just going to jump in there and take over the world. So Zachary Richard, I love him. They've compared him to Franz Wagner, Harrison Barnes, Cam Johnson, Michael Porter Jr. Those are some of his comparisons, which it's always tricky. It's impossible to really compare people. But his dad was a pro player. He has, again, a real good feel for the game, and he's got that length. And so that's who, if I had wherever we picked, that's who I would pick today. And they have Matas Basilis, and this guy's from France too, I think, and he's 6'10". He's playing in the for the Ignite. So the funny thing is, the G League is loaded. The Ignite has like 3 guys that are projected to go in the lottery, and they get blown out all the time. They're like the worst team in the G League because they're just playing against guys, like Braxton Key, who plays for Denver, that played for the Pistons. It's really good, or Stanley Amude, or Jared Rhoden that plays for the Crews. Those guys are real good. So he's skinny, and he's got good handles for a guy 6'10", and he's decent on defense, but he's not been shooting well, and he's supposed to be a shooter. So he shot at some point in his life. He's had some good stretches where he shot. It's really difficult on these guys, even like on these the G League teams on the Ignite. They got all these guys trying to make a name for themselves, and so they're all shooting the ball. So I don't think I watched him play a couple games. He doesn't touch the ball that much. But we'll see how he pans out. And then there's Alexander Sarr. He's 7'1". He's from France. He has pretty good handles, but his big thing is his defense. He can block shots at the rim, but he can also defend on the perimeter. And he's He's not always done it consistently. I think earlier in his career he didn't, but then he came over to the United States and played against Ignite, and I guess he was really impressive guarding people and switching out on Ron Holland, who we're going to talk about in a second. Another player that I really like is Cody Williams. He plays for Colorado. He's 6'8", but I love his brother. That's one of the great picks that OKC made, Jalen Williams, and he is one of the best player, most underrated players in the NBA. And I don't know if I mentioned Derek White is really underrated that plays for the Celtics, but anyway, he plays defense and he's not as thick. His brother J Dub or J Will they call him. He is built like a tank. He's real thick, but he can take the ball to the basket and shoot the three. But anyway, Cody is playing in college. He's had 2 20-point games recently. His percentages are high, but it's not on real high volume. But he's shot 50% from the floor and 50% on threes, and he shoots 68% from the line. So there's Ron Holland. He was number 1 on most draft boards, and he's kind of went down. But even though he started out slow in the G League he started playing better and better. But one thing that everybody can agree on, that nobody is more tenacious when he plays defense than Ron Holland anywhere. And I guess some guys have watched him play in practice, and he's not always as tenacious. But when he gets on the court, he is just going with everything he's got. But he's only 6'8", 6'6". I mean, he's a lot of people. You got to be careful. People, when they say their height, they a lot of times exaggerate their height more for the taller, never for the shorter. So anyway, he's scoring. He can shoot the three. He can take it to the basket. He plays with ferocity, and so there's always room for guys that play like that. I'm not sure that he's going to be a star, but he still is a good player. So my last one is a real sleeper, but he just got moved up to number 6 by ESPN on their draft board. His name's Tajay Salon, I think, and they've compared him to John Collins. He's 6'9", 6'10", 7'2" wingspan. He's bouncy and great athlete. He's got some moves. He got some handles. He can do step backs. He started the year bad shooting. And again, these guys don't always play a lot of minutes. These foreign guys, a lot of them play in the 20s in their minutes, and then they don't always get a lot of shots, depending on their professional team. When they get these young guys, like he's only 18. These guys, most of these guys are 18. So when they play on the professional teams in Europe, they don't always get respect by the older guys. So anyway, he's 6'9", 6'10", 7'2" wingspan and bouncy, and his shooting 38% on threes, but he was lower. So his recent games are going up. So anyway, you get to hear my dogs. They're excited. Somebody's coming down the driveway. But thank you for listening. Tomorrow night, I hope I have more information on Cade. If I hear anything, I might jump on. And we hope that he's better and be the reason somebody feels loved and cared for. And go Dogs and go Pistons.